know what you're going to say. You can't do that from the shoulder. Oh, really? That's news to me. Idiots. You can bump from any position you want to. It's not a science.
It's the trial of the century, folks. You may have heard of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard or the Rittenhouse trial before, but this trial is so serious that the consequences of its outcome could be a disaster upon humanity itself. And I'm talking about here the trial of Nick Rekieta. And this is my experience at the plea hearing of Nick Rekieta. And it starts by me showing up here at Candy Ojai County Courthouse. I step through the doors and I go through security and I talk to them. And she asks me, "Are you one of those bloggers?" And I'm like, well, kind of. So I go upstairs, pacing around, checking out the windows in anticipation of the Rekieta showing up. And then I hear this tiptoeing tapping coming down the hallway from behind me. I turn and look. And there I see a stickman-like figure with the gloomiest look on his face possible. It's Nick Rekieta. And his suit is far too big for him. There's folds at his elbows and his knees, buckling across his shoes. He almost looks like a kid going to his first wedding. It was embarrassing. It was disgusting. But when we made immediate eye contact from me turning around, I was immediately filled with this aroma that said to me, "Fuck you, Kiwi Farms." So to avoid any more awkward confrontations, even though it seems unlikely at this point, I step around the corner to wait for them to go into the courtroom. And when I hear the door close, I walk down the hall and I open the courtroom. And then, like a hawk swiveling on its neck, I turn and look. And there I see Nick Rekieta and Kayla Rekieta's exhausted eyes pinning into my very soul itself. I didn't even know Kayla was here at that point. I couldn't even see her walking down the hall because she's so short that she hid behind his lawyer and Rekieta. And when I mean short, I measured the height of my shoulder later because I got close enough to get a decent measurement. She wasn't even as tall as my shoulder, even though she had heels on. I'm going to estimate around that Kayla's about 4'10", maybe 4'11" if I'm being generous. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Rekieta cheated on his wife and wanted to open up the relationship. So we're sitting there waiting for the current hearing to conclude itself. Some drug possession, some drug dealing kind of whateverness. And then the judge states, "Sorry, we are behind schedule, and we have another hearing before yours." So the Rekietas and his lawyer step out in the hall to go do other things and discuss how the trial's gonna go. And eventually, obviously, the hearing before that finishes. And we're sitting there, waiting and waiting and waiting, while the judge is literally twiddling his thumbs and playing with a pencil. Until the judge slams his hands on the desk, stands up, and leaves the room, and mumbles underneath his breath, "Ugh, what a waste of my time." He was clearly frustrated with Nick. Especially since he was, delaying his lunch. Eventually, the Rekietas show up, and they get into the courtroom. Nick sits up over where he's supposed to sit with his defendant or whatever, his lawyer. And Kayla, luckily, decides to sit right in front of me, the glorious Kayla Rekieta. And that's where I got the height measurement, because she's decided, I'm going to sit right in front of you because we know who you are. And if I may say, Kayla has a nice ass for being 40. Just want to put it on the record. Put it on the record so everybody knows she's slimmed down. She's not looking too disheveled and horrible right now. So they sit there, and we're sitting and waiting for the judge now to show up. Because he was sick of waiting for the Rekietas. And Nick is just constantly just looking over his shoulder at us, glaring up with the back of his left eye to see what's going on, anxiously waiting for the judge to show up. And at the same time, His lawyer is breathing so heavy, it's echoing in the room, as if he just got done running a mile or something. And then Nick, in this situation, you can tell that he begins sweating a lot, and his face gets red, and he wipes away the sweat on his face with his very palms furiously, just because he's so frustrated about this whole experience. Eventually, the judge shows up. We all stand and rise for him to give his honors or blessings or whatever. And he announces this is the plea hearing for Nick Rekieta. And he asks for Nick's counsel to give the terms of the plea. And here are the terms. Nick Rekieta will plead guilty to third-degree drug possession. Okay? In exchange, Kayla Rekieta and April, whatever her real name is now, will have all charges dropped for them. He's being the fall guy. He's taking all the blame, which he rightly should, because it is all his fault. And the judge sits there and is like, okay, Nick, we need to ask you some questions, so stand before the law and wave away your rights of silence so I can question you on all these things. And the judge begins asking him about the current state of the trial and the things unfolding. And the package, how he's giving Nick a great deal, a package deal. And it's the decision. Had to pause real quick, some people are walking by. And the judge says, I'm giving you a great package deal. And he asks Rekieta, this was your decision to make, right? The people on the internet didn't coerce you into doing this. I kid you not. The judge asked him, Nick, the people of the internet weren't bullying you to do this. Kiwi Farms reference. And Rekieta's like, no, I believe that I am guilty. Guilty as they can be. And the judge notifies to Rekieta that he can't withdraw this plea deal. And if he did so, it would be very, very difficult. And Rekieta agrees. And the judge tells him, by putting out this plea deal and taking it, you are waving away your right to trial by jury. And Nick, of course, agrees. And that if Nick doesn't take this plea deal, and he turns his back on the offer that was generously given to him by the state, all charges come back for him, Kayla, and April. And Nick realizes that. And the judge once again asked him, Nick, you don't believe you're innocent, right? And Nick says, no, I am guilty. And the judge says, okay, we accept this offer. We think it's a reasonable offer. You here to admit to third-degree drug possession charges. The possibilities of these fines coming from pleading guilty to this is up to 20 years in jail and up to $250,000 fine. Nick, at this point, he's getting possibly fined $250,000, which is likely. But also that he has to pay back his judge, and he lost all that money he spent on the drugs. Nick Rekieta is easily out over $500,000 at this point. Easy with the outcome of this court case, if not more. And so the judge comes up to Rekieta and asks him to recall the events that happened that day, that he was busted for having drugs. And he states the address, which of course I wrote down, but I won't tell any of you, even though you probably find it. And Nick tells his side of the story, that he was half a mile away driving down the street. And the judge is like, did you have any drugs on you? Did you have any drugs in your vehicle? And Nick's like, no, I did not. But at my home, we did possess drugs. And what he stated was a 10-gram admixture of different drugs all combined and swathed together, but mostly containing cocaine. But Nick stood up and he's like, but there was no fentanyl. There was no fentanyl in that mixture, and I was very suspicious of that, to say the least. But the very much utmost, Nick admitted to mixing his cocaine with a bunch of gross pharmaceuticals and crushed up pills. And that Nick then claimed there, I was the sole person in possession of these. Nobody could access these drugs of mine. They were in a locked room, in a locked safe, and I wanted to scream, liar! Liar, Rekieta! We know for a fact you're lying because your 9-year-old daughter tested positive for cocaine. Liar! But the judge accepts it. And then the prosecutor is stepped in to give what are the expectations from this plea deal. And this is when she says that they won't do any more drug testing on Nick Rekieta, and they are just going to pull out the old files from his initial drug case. And at that point, I wanted to stand up and scream, I object! I object to this! This man is an addict! This man is a cocaine fiend! Huh. Disgusting, despicable work by this state. But what can we expect from the government these days? And they conclude the trial by talking about when they're going to proceed to the sentencing. And Nick mentions that they are going to be out of state from the 8th to the 9th traveling. And the judge is just like, well, I'll accept that for now. But if you break any of the expectations for your, what is it called? I blame this car. I blame the car. It made me lose track of thought. That he meets all expectations of his probation. Sorry about that. Unlikely, but possible, saying they're not going to drug test him anymore. So they conclude the trial and state that they will have the sentencing set for April 18th at 10 a.m. So that is my experience at the Nick Rekieta plea hearing. And I've been the King's Fool, and I hope you all have a good one.